Here on the channel, we talk a lot about authenticity. Authenticity. That is something that is completely lost throughout the mainstream media. Everything is agenda driven. Fox News has an agenda. MSNBC has an agenda. CNN has an agenda that changes by the hour. This is one of the biggest symptoms for a network that lacks an identity. ESPN definitely has an agenda. As I have said many times before, ESPN is no longer the worldwide leader in sports. It's the worldwide leader in woke. Seriously, who relies on ESPN for sports talk anymore? Shams Charania, he is the go-to NBA insider. He works for The Athletic. I rely on the NFL Network when I want information about the NFL. Accuse me of mythical misogyny all you want, but I refuse to watch Mina Kimes. I refuse to rely on Mina Kimes to give me analysis of a league that she's never played in. The closest Mina Kimes has gotten to an NFL locker room is when she's picking up their dirty laundry. There is no such thing as authenticity at ESPN. Who do you trust at that network? Do you trust Kendrick Perkins? Do you trust Ryan Clark? Hell, who's entertaining at ESPN? Outside of Stephen A. Smith, there is not one personality at ESPN that has the ability to entertain an audience. That is the main reason ESPN radio is dying a slow, painful death. The decline of ESPN, it has created opportunities for others to steal their core audience, to steal most of their audience. Barstool Sports, Clay Travis, he built Outkick by poaching viewers from ESPN. But you can make a strong case. The one person who benefited the most from the decline of ESPN, Pat McAfee. There is one reason and one reason only. The Pat McAfee Show is so successful. Authenticity. Pat McAfee is one of the boys. He's one of us. The conversations you hear on his show, they're the same conversations you hear at the bar. There's nothing polished about it. It's real. There's no talk of mythical racism. Pat McAfee, he doesn't complain about the fake racism in the NFL. He doesn't interrupt segments talking about the NBA to praise the dump divers in the WNBA. We need to be more equitable. The dump divers should get the same amount of airtime as the real basketball players. The reason Pat McAfee, the reason he can be authentic, he doesn't have to answer to anyone. His show is independent. Now sure, he's got sponsors, but sponsors, they're a dime a dozen. If one sponsor is triggered by this toxic masculinity, you just go out and find another sponsor that doesn't identify as a shitfuck. Over the last few months, there have been rumors that Pat McAfee was being pursued by major networks. Now, I'm not sure how many were interested. I would assume Fox was interested. I mean, FS1. They desperately need ratings and star power. Nerdy Nick Wright and his constant apologies for white privilege, that ain't bringing in the viewers. Shay Shay and Skippy Bebe, they can't attract freshly shaved buns to the grilled woke wiener. In my opinion, there was one network that Pat McAfee needed to avoid. There was one network where he would be treated as an outsider, wouldn't be the right fit. Of course, it is the one network he decided to go to bed with. Won't be long until Pat McAfee is introduced to the butt bongo because he decided to move his show to ESPN. Go ahead and get the burial plot prepared in the woke cemetery. I am sure Pat McAfee has already received his copy of the woke Bible. Word of advice? Don't drop the soap on Woke Bath Wednesday. My inside sources tell me Max Kellerman, very, very sneaky in the shower. Yesterday afternoon, Pat McAfee announced on his show that he had signed a deal with Woke United Methodist. It's being reported the deal's worth $10 million a year. I highly doubt this was about the money. Pat McAfee, he is leaving a deal with FanDuel that was paying him $120 million over the life of the contract. This deal was about increasing Pat McAfee's reach. This will make his show more mainstream, but at what cost? Nothing is free in this world. Now, I'm not going to sit here and criticize Pat McAfee for taking this deal with ESPN. He's a smart dude. He's doing what he thinks is best for him and his family and his show. If increasing the reach of his show was his ultimate goal, this is a great deal for Pat McAfee in the short term. Long term, I think Pat McAfee ends up regretting this decision. Yesterday, he tried to give his audience reassurance. He tried to convince them that nothing about his show is going to change when he moves to ESPN this fall. Watch for yourself.
We ain't changing a damn thing. That was literally the starter for every conversation with everybody this Up to Something season. What I discovered in these negotiations that I represented us in is that our show is what a lot of these suit folk are now viewing as the future of daily sports talk. Our show will also be on in every airport, cafe, restaurant, house, etc. with the incomparable power of ESPN. Out of respect for that, we have decided that we won't be saying fuck nearly as much, but every other word is good to go. This part's important, though, for folks who were speaking out of pocket and rather disrespectful last week. Relax. We will still have full creative control of the program. I will never ever sacrifice this show for anything. Why would ESPN want to license our show and then change it entirely? That would make no sense. Why would I want to go to a place and have to change the program entirely? That makes no sense.
Look, I am not going to destroy Pat McAfee like I would the average shitfuck. I'm not an everyday viewer of his show, but I like the guy. I respect Pat McAfee, but he is absolutely delusional if he thinks his show is not going to change. Might not happen immediately. There will be a honeymoon phase of 6 months, maybe even a year. I'm sure ESPN said all the right things during negotiations. Hey, Patty, we're not going to change you, brother. Can I call you brother, or do you prefer sister? Look, we are not looking to change you. We love you. Come be a part of our woke family. We want you to be yourself. I promise, brother, we will never change who you are. Yeah. You know, the devil does not approach you with horns and a pitchfork. The devil doesn't disguise himself by looking like Rachel Levine. He knows that approach won't work. He approaches you in a way that's very convincing. He makes you feel comfortable. Hell, at this point, ESPN, they might even mean what they say. They could be going into this deal with every intention on not changing Pat McAfee. But this approach, it's unsustainable at the worldwide leader in woke. What happens when Pat McAfee says something that triggers the emotional men on Twitter? ESPN monitors Twitter all day, every day. We have seen in the past how quickly they respond when the wanker spanking is interrupted by someone who speaks common sense. I wonder if Pat McAfee asked Sage Steele if ESPN doesn't silence people. Go ask Mike Golick how ESPN treats their employees. Why do you think Dan Patrick, Colin Cowherd, why do you think they left ESPN? They called it creative differences. That's another way of saying they won't let me do what I want to do. What about Charlie Arnold? She just told the world why she left ESPN. They silenced her. Go ask Dan Le Batard why he left ESPN. The list goes on and on. Pat McAfee is delusional if he thinks ESPN will give him full autonomy. All it's going to take is one controversy, one upset sponsor, one upset wanker spanker, and this show will change. And look, it doesn't even have to be Pat McAfee. It can be one of his guests. One instance of Aaron Rodgers saying something ESPN doesn't agree with. Bye-bye Aaron Rodgers, no longer allowed on the show. Pat McAfee, he tried to defend against this by saying, why would ESPN buy my show, then completely change what made me successful? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. On the surface, Pat McAfee is right. Doesn't make sense. But let's play devil's advocate here. Let's look at this from a different perspective. For starters, this is a great deal for ESPN. How many times have we talked about ESPN and their complete lack of star power? When is the last time ESPN created a star? Outside of Stephen A. Smith, there is not one personality at this network that is capable of generating headlines in the media. Every once in a while, someone like Kendrick Perkins will say something stupid. They'll generate attention for 12 hours, then they disappear. And it's not from lack of effort. ESPN's tried to create stars. They tried with Bomani Jones, huge embarrassing failure. They tried with Mina Kimes, no one takes her seriously. They had a legitimate star in Rachel Nichols, someone who is highly respected in NBA circles. What did ESPN do with her? They sacrificed her career to elevate no talent Maria Taylor. How in the fuck did that work out for them? PD Pablo Torre, Katie Nolan, one of the best in the business at converting oxygen to carbon dioxide to keep the potted ficus alive. Jamel Hill, Ryan Clark, Malika Andrews. Failure, 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 failure. So what do you do when you can't create stars? You go out and buy one. It's no different than the Yankees buying the stars in Major League Baseball or the Lakers buying stars in the NBA. Like I said in the beginning, Pat McAfee, as an independent platform, has been taking viewers away from ESPN. Think about this from their perspective. Your competition is destroying you. Pat McAfee and other shows like him, they have been taking viewers from ESPN, especially over the last 3 years. Pat McAfee, he is the most influential. He has the biggest brand. So what do you do if you're ESPN? You buy out your competition. You promise him the world. You give him massive reach. And over time, you try to mold him into what you want him to be. This won't be a drastic change. It'll be slow. Maybe the changes will be subtle at first. A little shift here, a small adjustment there. Pat McAfee, he might even try to fight back. But what is he going to do? He is locked into a contract. If Stephen A. Smith can't change ESPN, how can Pat McAfee change it? His show does not fit the ESPN brand. The Pat McAfee Show, it is the complete antithesis to everything else ESPN presents. How long can that last? How is that sustainable? ESPN doesn't give a shit about Pat McAfee. They only care about losing their core audience. You buy your competition, hoping that core audience follows him to your network. Will that core audience be willing to watch a watered-down version of Pat McAfee? Doubtful. And look, I could be wrong. ESPN could give Pat McAfee full autonomy. He could end up being the same guy that he's been on YouTube all these years. But if that's really the case, why would Stephen A. Smith launch a podcast outside of ESPN? If ESPN is not willing to give full autonomy to Stephen A. Smith, what makes Pat McAfee think they're going to give it to him? I hope I'm wrong, because I really like Pat McAfee. Maybe he's able to change ESPN. Maybe he will be the great white hope. I seriously doubt it. But you tell me, is Pat McAfee delusional? Will ESPN keep their promise and give him full autonomy? Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, KC_BTL84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys later.